Welcome again for the third video. Satellite technology is being used in many things happening in the world today. In particular, communications are often carried out with the help of satellite technology. In addition, a variety of satellites, as well as a variety of space instruments and space stations have been put into orbit for many other purposes. Some of these spacecraft have retired after completing their work and sometimes crash into Earth without human control. Hundreds of satellites and other spacecraft in orbit have crashed into the Earth without human control, endangering human life. This phenomenon has become so dangerous because of the inability to even predict the area where the satellites will fall. In this video, let's talk about 10 biggest satellites falling from space. Let's find out what satellites and space instruments fell to Earth from time to time in this way. The European Space Agency's GOCE satellite fell to Earth on November 10, 2013 to meet a fiery doom during re-entry. It was launched into space in 2009 and spent 4 years mapping the Earth's gravitational field and oceans in unprecedented detail. The gravity-mapping GOCE satellite weighed about 1 ton and was about 17 feet long. That's pretty big, but much larger satellites have made uncontrolled re-entries over the years. The Upper Atmosphere Research Satellite, also known by its shorter name UARS, is in the grasp of the Remote Manipulator System end effector above the payload bay of the Earth orbiting Discovery during STS-48 pre-deployment checkout procedures. The 6.5-ton UARS satellite was 35 feet long and 15 feet wide. NASA's Space Shuttle Discovery deployed the Climate Satellite in September 1991 on the orbiter's STS-48 mission. UARS studied Earth's atmosphere for 14 years, measuring many key chemicals that are still being tracked by other craft today. UARS also provided important information about the amount of light that comes from the sun at ultraviolet and visible wavelengths. The $750 million satellite was decommissioned by NASA in December 2005 and fell to Earth in September 2011. Researchers estimated that about 1,170 pounds of UARS 6.5-ton bulk likely survived re-entry. The U.S. space station Skylab in its prime during the mid-1970s. NASA launched the Skylab space station in 1973, and a total of 3 crewed missions visited the 85-ton space station in 1973 and 1974. NASA originally envisioned Skylab to stay on orbit for a decade or so, but that didn't happen. Higher than expected solar activity heated and expanded Earth's atmosphere, increasing the drag on Skylab. By the middle of 1979, it was ready to come down. There wasn't much NASA could do to control the outpost's re-entry, but the space agency was able to manage some of Skylab's tumbling maneuvers. On July 11, 1979, Skylab returned to Earth, burning up over the Indian Ocean in Western Australia. Some large chunks survived re-entry, making landfall southeast of Perth and elsewhere. Nobody was hurt, but the Australian town of Esperance charged NASA $400 for littering. NASA launched the 11.6-ton Pegasus 2 satellite in 1965 to study the abundance of micrometeoroids in low Earth orbit. Pegasus 2 gathered data and beamed it home for about 3 years, then zipped around Earth for another 11 years, during which time its orbit got progressively lower and lower. The satellite finally came down on November 3, 1979, but the debris splashed down harmlessly in the mid-Atlantic Ocean. Salyut 7 was the last of 9 space stations the Soviet Union launched under its Salyut program from 1971 to 1982. Salyut 7 blasted off on April 19, 1982, and stayed aloft for nearly 9 years, harboring 6 different resident crews during its operational life. Salyut 7 was about 52 feet long and 13.6 feet across at its widest point. The total mass of the outpost was about 22 tons. The uncrewed space station came barreling back to Earth on February 7, 1991. At the time, a spaceship called Cosmo 1686 was docked to Salyut 7 to help test the attachment of expansion modules to space stations. Cosmo 1686 was also uncrewed, and it tipped the scales at about 22 tons as well. The huge Salyut 7 Cosmo 1686 complex burned up and broke up over Argentina, with some debris scattering over a town called Capitan Bermudez. There were no reported injuries. Tragically, NASA's Space Shuttle Columbia also made an uncontrolled return to Earth at the end of its STS-107 mission in 2003. On February 1, 2003, Columbia broke apart over northeastern Texas as it returned home from a 16-day science mission. All 7 astronauts aboard were killed and the 100-ton orbiter was destroyed. An investigation later cited heat shield damage to the leading edge of Columbia's left wing as the cause of the disaster. A piece of foam insulation from Columbia's external fuel tank broke off during launch and punched a hole in the shuttle's wing 82 seconds after liftoff on January 16, 2003. The damage allowed super-hot plasma from the spacecraft's atmospheric entry to penetrate Columbia's left wing, destroying the vehicle as it headed to its landing site at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Nobody on the ground was hurt, but the loss of Columbia marked the second fatal disaster of NASA's 30-year shuttle program. The secret Soviet Navy satellite called Cosmos 954, which was launched on September 18, 1977, spiraled out of control. The spy radar antennas each sported a compact nuclear reactor, making the re-entry one of the most frightening to date for people on the ground. Though this Soviet spy craft was not the biggest uncrewed satellite to crash to Earth, it may have been the scariest. The 8,400-pound Cosmos 954 launched in September 1977 on a mission to track the movements of U.S. nuclear submarines. Cosmos 954 itself was nuclear-powered, and its reactor core failed to separate and boost the spacecraft to a higher, nuclear-safe orbit as planned. That made the satellite's out-of-control re-entry, on January 24, 1978, a cause for global concern. Cosmos 954 came back to Earth over northwestern Canada, spreading radioactive debris over a wide area. The Canadian government billed the Soviet Union $6 million to cover the cost of the search and cleanup efforts. The Soviets eventually paid $3 million. Several other nuclear-powered Soviet satellites have plummeted to Earth, including Cosmos 1402. In 1983. On April 1, 2018, China's Tiangong-1 space laboratory fell out of the sky, breaking apart and burning up in the skies over the southern Pacific Ocean at about 8:16 p.m. EDT, according to the U.S. Strategic Command's Joint Force Space Component Command. Tiangong-1 was about 34 feet long by 11 feet wide, and it weighed more than 9 tons. The space lab consisted of 2 main parts: an experimental module that housed visiting astronauts and a resource module that accommodated Tiangong-1's solar energy and propulsion systems. China launched Tiangong-1 into orbit September 29, 2011. It flew about 217 miles above Earth and hosted astronaut crews from China's Shenzhou 9 and Shenzhou 10 missions in 2012 and 2013, respectively. After those missions, the primary goals for the lab, which had a 2-year lifespan, were complete. In March 2016, Chinese flight controllers lost contact with Tiangong-1 and it was allowed to fall from space. China's second space lab, Tiangong-2, fell to Earth on July 19, 2019. Unlike its Tiangong-1 predecessor, Tiangong-2's re-entry was controlled. The 8.6 metric ton Tiangong-2 re-entered over the South Pacific Ocean uninhabited area, a dumping ground for defunct spacecraft. Tiangong-2 launched in September 2016 and was used by China to test life support, refueling and resupply capabilities to support the development of a larger 20-ton space station. The mini space station hosted China's Shenzhou 11 mission, the longest crewed spaceflight by China to date, in late 2016. It also welcomed China's first robotic cargo ship, called Tianzi-1, in April 2017. In September 2018, the China Manned Space Engineering Office announced the Tiangong-2 Space Lab would be deorbited in 2019 to end its mission. Russian Federal Space Agency, Roscosmos, via NASA. One of the largest spacecraft ever to re-enter Earth's atmosphere remains the massive Mir space station, which was deorbited by Russia on March 23, 2001. Unlike most other falling spacecraft on this list, Mir's re-entry was a completely controlled descent aimed at disposing of the iconic Russian space station in the Pacific Ocean. Russia's Mir space station consisted of several cylindrical modules launched separately and assembled in orbit between 1986 and 1996. By 2001, Mir weighed 135 tons and spent 15 years in space. Mir was as large as 6 school buses and, with the exception of 2 periods without a crew, was continuously inhabited until August 1999. Mir re-entered the Earth's atmosphere near Nadi, Fiji, and fell into the South Pacific.